everyone. We are back with another fireside chat. This time, the chat is called Launching a Pay-Per-Call Program in Less Than 30 Days. And we have Ninfa from Madrivo. How are you doing today, Ninfa?
I'm doing great. How are you, Tony?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. And so, as I mentioned in the title above, or just a second ago, we're going to be talking today about getting started with pay per call. And so, there's so many different types of ways that you can get more traffic to your campaigns, and pay per call is definitely a space that a lot of people feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. And so we have Ninfa here who is from Madrivo, and she's been in the space for a while and she knows a lot about pay per call. And so just diving in really quick, Ninfa, can you tell us, just the people at home, what Madrivo is?
Yeah, so Madrivo, we're an online marketing agency. So we help businesses acquire new consumers. And we help them, generate leads through various digital marketing channels that we have available. So it could be email, display, comparison sites, path traffic, social, SEO, different ways that we can help them acquire new consumers.
Awesome. And do you are you guys limited to like a specific geo? Like, do you specialize in specific geos, or just kind of throughout the world?
Usually we try to focus just in the USA. So we work with brands that are going to have more nationwide, like they'll be able to work with nationwide, all states or the majority of the states. We really don't work with anything outside of the states right now. There's so many changing regulations that we're just sticking to the United States.
I see. Yeah, it's hard to definitely to make adjustments like that, and it has such a huge impact too when these new regulations come out, that you have to definitely it's definitely time consuming. And in terms of the types of businesses that you guys work with, could you give us some examples of kind of the types of clients you work with?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of different verticals. We break it down by vertical. So for us, our top verticals that we work with are finance, insurance, home services, education. And within those, categories or those verticals, we have subcategories underneath. So finance, it would be that we work with mortgages, we work with personal loans, credit cards, banking. So it kind of dives into smaller subcategories underneath those. But the main categories that we do really well with is finance, insurance, home services, education, and there are a lot of other ones that if anybody ever needs a list of what verticals we work well in, I could always send that out.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And so, because the performance space has so many competitors, and it's massive, it's global. What are the main reasons why somebody would choose Madrivo over the competition?
I would say that it's because of the performance-based advertising model that we have. So this for us means that you're going to pay for actual results. So you're going to pay for the clicks, the leads, the sales, rather than just an ad impression somewhere or a click that may not result in any conversion. And then we also will target and optimize to help you make the most out of your campaign that you're working with. So we have a lot of the pre-click information. The advertiser, the brand has the post-click information. And once we pass that information on to the brand, they can see the entire picture, which is going to help them optimize.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely you're definitely giving them the whole picture and helping them uh, make adjustments. And I kind of feel like a lot of similar companies, they sort of leave everyone sort of out in the dark. They kind of just like, you have the data, but they don't really give you anything with it.
Yes, that happens a lot. So we
Yeah.
try to give the data, and then we also would prefer for the advertiser to give us some data. But we know, again, there's regulations involved. Sometimes we can get it, sometimes we can't. But with giving the post-click information, at least that's going to help the brand optimize and then hopefully increase conversions. So we'll be able to scale a little bit more with them.
Awesome. And then in terms of Madrivo, how do you guys work in the pay per call space?
So we sit in the middle, right? So just like another network, we sit in the middle where We are a pay-per-call network. It connects the businesses with the publisher who have large audience, can drive phone calls to their call centers. So what we can do on our side is we can provide the technology and the tracking tools to make sure that the calls are attributed to the publisher and that the business only pays for the valid calls, that, you know, they get to pick the criteria that they want to pay on. And so we work within all of that to make sure that that's actually done. And then with the tracking platform, we make sure that everything is done in real time and that analytics are, you know, available so we can make real time optimizations and be able to scale a little bit faster than others.
Awesome. And it kind of seemed like you guys sort of provide the infrastructure to enable a business to kind of get started and succeed in pay-per-call.
We can. The brand does have to have at least a call center to start off with, but we can provide the tracking platform that they would use in order to make sure that everything is working properly.
Awesome. Well, that's some fantastic kind of background info on Madrivo and what you guys do and how you work with pay-per-call. And so diving into the subject of today. So in terms of pay-per-call, what advantages do you feel that pay-per-call campaigns have over traditional affiliate marketing campaigns?
So that's a really good question. When thinking of this, I was trying to make sure that I don't give too much information and make it too complicated. So I wanted to drill it down to three main things of why, what the advantages are. So the main three that I think are really important is going to be, it has a higher conversion rate. You have greater control over the quality of the lead that you're getting, and it improves the customer experience. You know, so for the higher conversion rate, it's usually higher because customers are more interested in making a purchase. They're the ones that are initiating the call. All the pay-per-call that we do is consumer initiated. So we're not dialing out, they're dialing in. So the intent of that consumer is a lot higher. You have better control over your leads because you get to screen the call. You get to set what you want to pay for. You get to set when you want to receive calls and that you only pay for quality leads, you know, so you have more control over it. And as far as the improved customer experience, you get to, you know, talk directly to the consumer. There's no middleman. It's your call center, your agent that is speaking directly with the consumer. So they get more of a personalized experience. It's more engaging. So I really think that those are probably going to be my top three of, you know, advantages of doing pay-per-call.
That's awesome. And do you feel that you mentioned intent, like, do you feel it's like the highest form of intent by a customer in like a lead gen campaign?
I don't know if it would be the highest one. I know that there are others that also are very high, but not pulling the data. I don't want to give the wrong information, but I would say that it would be one or two at least, you know?
Yeah. And just thinking about it on the surface, like having, you know, you're interested in a product and you're taking time to physically call and say, you know, I'm interested, I want to talk to somebody. And you don't typically do that unless you're really, you know, motivated to move forward. So that's, I thought that was definitely interesting to note. And in terms of, with pay-per-call campaigns, what are the kind of the challenges that brands have with working with them?
So I would say that because the consumer has a higher intent and the value is a little bit higher, the cost then is also going to be higher. So the pay-per-call campaigns overall are a little bit more expensive than other marketing channels. So that's going to be one. Integration challenges also may be an issue. And it's what I have seen too, where maybe the brand's call center is not ready to receive the amount of calls that we would be able to send. So, or they're not, they don't have the proper tracking, or they can't attribute the calls to a specific pub. So that all could be a problem. We have a solution for it, but sometimes that will take a little bit for them to go through all their process to make sure that they're going to be able to make some changes on their end. And then the third one is fraud prevention. You really need to be vigilant when doing paper calls and making sure that you are reviewing your calls and making sure that you're not paying for fake or super low quality calls, because that's going to make an impact on your ROI pretty quickly. I mean, calls are coming in by the second. So you're going to need to make sure that you're set up to, have fraud prevention in your campaign, or have, for instance, if we were managing it, we would do that for the brand on our side if they don't have it available for themselves to do.
Interesting. And you mentioned in terms of like the low quality calls, like what would be an example of like a low quality call?
It would be that somebody's just wanting to talk to somebody. So sometimes where you're running a Medicare offer, it's older people, and sometimes they just want to call and talk, so you can tell there's really not the intent there. It's just that they're wanting to talk for an hour with somebody when they should have been done in 30 minutes, and it's hard for the agent to keep the call moving, or they talk really slow just to get going, so
yeah.
you have different things that you get used to it. Once you start listening to calls and checking, doing quality control on the calls, you kind of pick them up pretty quickly.
Awesome. And in terms of the verticals, I know you mentioned some that you guys work with in Madrivo, but are there certain verticals that work better with pay per call?
Definitely there is. So verticals where phone calls are part of the sales process. So a lot of times finance would be part of the sales process. They need to call and verify the person is actually the person. Home services, where they need to set up an appointment to come look at your windows, to come look at your roofing, or set up an appointment for solar. Those do really well. Legal services, healthcare does really well. So those are the ones that we see the highest success rate with.
Okay, so like maybe companies where you would either need to schedule like a in-person or virtual appointment, or where it's more of not a bigger sale, but it's more involved kind of sale process.
Yeah. So sometimes people that are getting like insurance, it takes a little bit more. They have to talk to you to verify, that kind of stuff. So yeah, those types are the ones that tend to do well.
Awesome. And so if you're a brand and you're thinking about it, when do you think it's the right time for a brand to launch a pay-per-call program?
I would say it's time to launch it when they're ready to increase their conversion rates, So as long as they have a call center in place already that can handle incoming calls, and they want to take their campaign, their offer, promotion to the next stage and increase conversions, get new consumers that are ready to engage with the brand. Again, these are consumer initiated. They're not warm transfers or anything like that. So when they're ready for that and they have the call center, I think that's when they should do it.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe they want to also kind of have a little extra room in their budget, or just be more kind of off the ground a little bit, so they can afford to kind of take a little bit of a higher hit, just because of the higher price of the leads.
Right.
Awesome. And in terms of to get started, I know we mentioned or you mentioned the call center, and then you also mentioned integrations. Could you kind of just discuss, just some of the values of some of the integrations that somebody would need to get started?
Some of the values of the integration, like what software to use, or
yeah, what software, and kind of what software you prefer, and then also kind of what the integrations do essentially.
Yeah. So a great software that we currently use is Ringba with Everflow. So you guys integrate together. It's easy tracking between the both of your platforms, and it's one that we refer people to as well. So and it's kind of in conjunction. It's not one or the other. It's like, hey, these two work really well together. So I would say making sure that you have that platform that tracks calls and attributes them to the very specific sub ID, which is going to be very important, because there are platforms out there that they're just like, oh, we can track your calls, but we can't tell you where they came from. And that just, it's not worth it, right? So I would say that's going to be the most important thing, to have that. And again, it's a solution that we can provide. We work with you, we work with Ringbuzz, so we can provide that solution.
Awesome. And then in terms of other kind of tools and things that a brand would need to get started, do you have any recommendations for tools to locate new pay-per-call affiliates?
It's not so much a tool. I think you first need to look in-house, right? So your first thing is going to look at your publishers now and call them and ask them, hey, can you add a phone number to the creative that you're already running with us? Most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. How much are you paying me for the call? You know, so I would work in-house first and then work outside, you know, start looking at other forms like in LinkedIn, see who's talking about pay-per-call, start looking at Facebook to see who's doing the pay-per-call campaigns. That's how you're going to find your affiliates. But the easiest way is if you already have an affiliate program, talk to your publishers. They probably can do it already. And then you can work with like a network like us that we have a base of pay-per-call affiliates already lined up. And we just have to onboard your campaign and then we take care of everything else. And you would just have one person to talk to instead of talking to multiple publishers. We can handle everything for you.
Awesome. That's great to know. And it's interesting because the concept of them the publishers just adding a phone number, it doesn't seem like much, but it opens up a new kind of revenue stream for them as well.
It does. Yes.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And in terms of fraud prevention, do you have any sort of, besides like the platform stuff we have at Everflow, and do you have any kind of either tools or strategies you recommend for kind of mitigating fraud in a pay-per-call program?
Yeah, so there's different ways you can do that. So you can get a tool that is going to kind of send you information of things to look at. At Madrivo, we are kind of a hybrid. So we have a person that their entire job every day is to listen to calls. So they listen to calls. We pull a report and we're like, listen to these today, listen to these, you know, this day. And so that's all they do all day long. Listen to calls to look to see what sounds funny. Is it the same person calling over and over again with a different story? You know, so they look at all those different things. And so I would recommend a hybrid of having a tool and having somebody that is actually doing it, because AI is amazing. AI and the tools are going to pull up stuff, but it's still a computer, right? So it's learning what to look at. A person also makes mistakes, but at the same time, having both really helps out because you'll be able to get more information out of a live person and the tool that you're using.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I found that at the last place I worked, we did a lot with kind of our customized fraud protection, and a big thing is combining the kind of the reach of the technology and the power of technology, but with the human kind of guidance and the human kind of overview. Just allows you to kind of make sure everything is accurate and also kind of fill in the gaps as well.
100%.
Awesome. And in terms of go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, nothing is fail proof, like, right? Everything could mess up. And so having both, I think you're up one, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of a brand, so like say a brand's getting started pay-per-call, is there different strategies, or either whether it's creative, whether it's payout, is there anything that you'd recommend for the brands to get the most pickup on their offers?
Yeah, so I think setting your clear criteria of what you want for those calls is going to be number one. You know, so you need to make sure that you understand what you want as a consumer, and make sure that the publisher understands that that's what you want and that's what you're going to want to pay for, and what you don't want to pay for. So I feel like that's going to be, top of the funnel for everybody. We need to have very clear information on that and not be in the gray. After that, I would say it's going to be making sure that you have a competitive payout. So for instance, if you're running an ACA offer and everybody's paying $1 on 90 seconds for a qualified ACA lead on a pay-per-call, and you come in and you're like, oh yeah, I want the same criteria as everybody else, but I only want to pay 25 cents. you're not going to get anything with that. Nobody's going to want to run it when you're at 25 cents when everybody else in the market's paying $1. So you also need to make sure that your payout is going to be competitive with everybody else. And then if you're able to provide affiliates with any marketing materials or the angle that you want them to use to promote your offer, that's also really going to help, because then they don't have to create anything. They already know what you have. You're sending it to them, and you can tell them, hey, this angle works. This works. Try this. And it's just easier and faster for an affiliate to onboard it, pick it up, and start sending traffic to it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that having that sort of material is always helpful, and it's kind of circling back to the competitive, payouts, making sure that you're up with everyone else or even slightly ahead to get more pickup. Are there any places that you'd recommend that brands go to kind of look to determine their pricing?
In the past, I was looking at Offer Vault is what it's called,
yes.
Actually. And then there was another one, I can't remember the name of it. I think it started with an O as well, but there's different places you can look. Also just ask, say, you can ask your rep, hey, I'm thinking on an ACA call, I think I can pay $1 for 90 seconds. And they'll tell you, hey, that's competitive. It looks like the market is asking for $1. Do you want more of the traffic, or do you just want to be in line and kind of thrown in? And if you want more, maybe pay $1.25. Or if you just want to be, status quo at $1, you could be status quo at $1. But most people, I would say, are pretty transparent on it and telling you, you're just way out of line. You're nowhere near where everybody else is,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that you mentioned kind of talking to your rep. I don't think a lot of publishers do that. I think that they just whether it's a network or whether it's a brand they're working with direct, I think that there's a lot of, it's kind of a weird conversation to have, to kind of discuss sort of what's working and what recommendations. But working with so many campaigns, everyone on networks has so much experience that they can definitely give you best practices and good insights. You just have to ask them.
Correct. Yeah. Again, communication, it's going to help out a lot.
For sure. And then in terms of the types of affiliates that work best with pay-per-call, are there specific types that you're seeing traditionally do well with it? Maybe any kind that are maybe emerging lately that are doing better?
Yeah. So in the beginning, Madrivo, we just thought that it had to be a pay-per-call publisher, somebody that's all they do. And for a while, we were just like, no, it has to be this publisher. What do you mean that a social publisher can also be pay-per-call? So we found out later that regular publishers, that are doing social, email, display, even comparison sites are good pay-per-call publishers, So as long as they know how to get the traffic that they're supposed to be targeting, can be a great pay-per-call campaign. And again, they already know the angle. They already know how the creative works. They already know how to buy media. So they know all those things. They're really adding a phone number and getting another, avenue of making money. And it's been fantastic. And it's been very eye-opening to see all these other publishers emerge where you were just like, how can a social pub be a pay-per-call pub? It wasn't making sense, but they are, and they do well.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting trend or an interesting direction that things have gone, because I just, in my experience, that the pay-per-call has always been like certain types of publishers do it. And the fact that everyone can do it now is sort of is interesting. Do you kind of feel like the main elements to be able to do it, if you're an affiliate who is looking to get started, would just be, obviously the physical nature, you're going to have a phone number on the campaigns, but beyond that, maybe just your kind of call to action will be something maybe more driven towards generating a call versus generating like a lead submission, essentially?
Yeah. So your call to action button will change a little bit, and you may want to change your entire, your angle could stay the same, but when they click on it, instead of going to a lead gen page, it's going to automatically try to dial out.
Yep.
So that's what the changes that they would make on their end, which are simple changes that most publishers already know how to make. And like I said, advertisers are already sending their creatives to them. So it's pretty easy just to swap out creatives on the publisher side.
Yeah, that's interesting how quickly you can kind of set that up. And is there any sort of I don't know, even best practices, like, so say if you're an affiliate who's not using the creatives that are given for a pay per call campaign, like, is there any sort of things you guys have seen, like whether it's like the size of the call button or the shape of it, or any kind of other on page stuff that you've seen that have been kind of effective for affiliates?
I haven't really noticed that. But if they're not using the advertiser's ad copy or angle, my recommendation is to turn it in just so they can review it to make sure that it's something that they're going to want.
Yeah.
That would be my only recommendation. But I haven't seen anything really that it's like one size works better than another.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. And in terms of if you're a brand and you're working to get your pay per call program set up, and as you start to kind of grow it and scale it, are there certain common mistakes that brands make with their pay per call programs?
Yeah, I would say that they're not properly screening the calls for quality. Again, the fraud and making sure that their agent is able to quickly make a decision whether or not that's going to be a good call. Also, not providing the call criteria that they're going to want during a call. So, again, you just have to be super clear on what you will accept and will not accept, and then not offering the competitive payouts. I think those are really the three biggest mistakes that I've seen on my side. And then it's hard to get restarted, right? If you're not, if you make changes after the fact or you pause your campaign to make the changes and then restart, it takes a little bit to get going again because the publishers have moved on. So that's why we want to make sure that we're coming in with the best practices, all the information ahead of time, so we can start from the beginning with a very good campaign that we're not going to have to pause.
I see. So it's almost like taking a little bit more time at the beginning to kind of make sure things are set up properly. It seems like the way to go.
Correct. Yeah. Because if in the middle of it, you're like, hey, you know what? I actually only want to take people from the Northeast and I don't want anybody from the South, and you're like, well, there was a lot of people from the South that were coming in. So that's going to affect your ROI. Now we're going to make these changes. The publishers have already purchased certain, they buy media and it was nationwide. Now they're having to buy media in a certain area. So it costs more, so that affects everything.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that definitely kind of frustrating them. And also just kind of, if I was a publisher, I'd just be like, well, what are these guys doing? They're kind of changing things up. So that's definitely interesting. Is there, in terms of, I know we covered a little bit before finding affiliates, and I know you mentioned, if you have them in-house, it's great. If you find them on, say, like a, Offer Vault or other places like that, that's great too as well. But do you guys either Madrivo, or do you know any sources that kind of can help educate publishers on how to become a pay-per-call publisher?
Yep. So we can at Madrivo, and there are other classes. I didn't ask permission ahead of time to see if I can name them or not, but there are other partners that we work with that have pay-per-call classes, and they teach you from zero to becoming a guru in pay-per-call. So if anybody has any questions on that, wants to reach out to me directly, I'll just put you in contact with that person as well. And again, on our side, we have people that are very well versed in the pay-per-call space that we can also help you in getting started.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I think it's something that, a little bit of education will help the publishers kind of dive into it and be a little more successful off the start, because it is a little unique versus their standard kind of offer promotion. So,
right.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And in terms of, when you have your pay-per-call program going, are there certain types of metrics that you want to use to kind of evaluate the success as it starts?
Yeah, so I would look at the number of calls that you received on your campaign, look at your conversion rates and your ROI. So it's hard to make a decision when it's just 25 calls, total. I think you're going to have better decisions to make when you have a few publishers that are running the campaign and you're going to have at least 100 calls. You'll be able to get the traffic evaluation and the quality of that traffic a little bit better because you have more to go off of. Sometimes buyers or brands want to stop an offer after like 10 calls because they only got one sale out of the 10 or no sales out of the 10. I'm like, that's such a small number that you
Yeah.
really can't tell. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd recommend, like, at minimum, how many do you think you'd recommend so you can evaluate quality?
I think you need, 25 calls a day for at least a week, to really figure out what's working per publisher. So per sub ID, they're going to need at least 100 calls to really figure out what's working and what's not working. And then remember, within those 100 calls, somebody should be doing the fraud quality check. So somebody's listening to the call ahead of time and saying, hey, this is not working out. So whatever network you're working with, like if you're working with us, we're already calling the publisher and saying, you need to optimize something because I don't think this buyer is going to end up liking your quality. And if you're going to want to scale later, you need to clean this up, and make it a little bit better, optimize it a little bit more. So you want to be working with people that are also going to be doing that for you.
And in terms of that, is there specific things? I know you mentioned before about like either the folks who talk slow or the people who just kind of want to chat. Are there any specific things beyond that somebody who is monitoring for quality should look for?
Yeah, you also need to look at the call center because a lot of times it might be that the call center agent just doesn't know the program, doesn't know what to say or how to close a deal. It's not always on the publisher side, so you also need to listen how that call center agent is working and if they're working properly and trying to make the sale.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that being something where the publisher is very excited and they got the leads coming in, and and the advertiser's excited, but if the call center is not closing it, then that just kind of everything sort of falls apart.
Right. We've had some where the call center put them on hold for over 2 minutes after they were doing something, then it drops off, and it's
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's on you. That's on the call center. It wasn't on the pub.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I don't think that's something that a lot of people consider. So that's fantastic. And in terms of other kind of we mentioned or you mentioned maybe 25 calls a day for like a week. Are there any other kind of starting out kind of benchmarks that you should pay attention to when you're launching your pay-per-call program?
Everything is different. So it's all based on vertical. So as long as you have your competitive rates, you have your call center set up and you're looking at what your ROI, because everybody has a different ROI they need to hit. So look at your program as a holistic view, but then also dive into it a little bit, per sub ID to see if something is just out of whack. If someone is just sticking out like an eyesore because their numbers are totally different than anybody else, that's what you really need to look for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a great way to either catch fraud or identify just kind of the superstars in your program.
Yeah, and learning what your program is going to end up being. So your conversion rate is going to be X. Your ROI looks like it's going to be this, So then from there, you kind of get a base, and then you can start optimizing and try to increase conversion rates in your ROI from there.
That makes a lot of sense. So essentially, you may not know you could have a target of what you think you're trying to get at ROI wise, but when you won't know kind of where it's going to settle until you have some data that kind of comes in.
Right.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And in terms of sort of, when you have your program, it's launched and it's moving along. What are some key kind of steps that you recommend to help for a brand to scale?
So I recommend working with a network like Madrivo, where you're going to have access to a big group of publishers that we already work with, we've already vetted. So I would say that would be one of the things to increase and start scaling is to work with a network so they can help maximize and increase all your marketing efforts. And then outside of that, I would say you need to optimize your call criteria and make sure that you're zoning that in and passing that information onto your network and to your publishers. And so everybody understands what your standard of quality of your campaign is going to be or needs to be. So I think those are going to be the next steps after you get going.
That's interesting. And you mentioned as far as like, working with a network. I know obviously you're biased at Madrivo, but if somebody was kind of looking to choose a network, like what sort of things would you think would be essential for them that network to have in place?
They would need to have the tools to help you, figure out that tracking is done. I would ask to know that they have a QC person and a tool that's going to, listen to the calls and be able to pick out calls of what to look for. I'd also want to make sure that your account manager that's going to be managing your campaign can really dive into the analytics and tell you what's working and what's not working on their end. Or if they see something just out of the norm, if one publisher's, converting at 50%, but we know that lifetime your campaign is at 10, that's going to be a red flag. I like to know the protocols of what happens when stuff like that. Do they automatically try to fix it on their own, or do they come to you and ask you to fix it? Those are things that I would want to know. I'd also want to know who's going to, how are you going to look at proofs beforehand? Is the network going to approve the proofs, or are you sending the proofs to the brand? Do they have, are they looking at your brand guidelines? Do they ask for your brand guidelines? Those are all types of questions that I would ask ahead of time to figure out who you want to work with.
Yeah, that's a fantastic list of stuff there. I think that definitely something that you mentioned before about the quality control. I sort of feel like pay-per-call has maybe the most human element involved in fraud protection on any of these campaigns out there. Because it seems like when you're doing like either it's like a paid search campaign or you're doing a organic content site campaign, any sort of traditional performance marketing campaigns, I feel like it's more cut and dry with the results, but with pay-per-call, there is this big human component to it.
There is.
That's fascinating. And then in terms of, once you start growing your program, is there a specific amount of time where you might feel like, maybe this program is not working out? Is it just a matter of, say, the ROI, or is there any other factors where you may say, maybe pay-per-call just isn't right for me?
Maybe the ROI expectation was incorrect, so it would be a good time to look at the ROI and decide, were we just incorrect thinking that this was what we were supposed to get? But overall, they are getting the consumers that they're looking for. So it's something that they need to decide in-house. Again, I don't see their back end. I'm not in their book, so I don't know how it's working for them or not. It's all based on the information that they give us. So if they're going to decide whether it's working or not working, I would ask myself those questions. Did I just pull this number to get an ROI because that's where we would want to hit it? Or is it because it's based on data that we thought that this is what we were going to hit? So maybe reevaluating the ROI might be a good idea, but also just figuring out, does it make sense to keep adding new consumers to the brand, that we're looking for? How much do we want to keep brand awareness still and have people still calling into the call center? What are we going to do with the call center? All those types of questions are questions that I feel like need to be asked when you're reevaluating whether something is working or not working.
That's fantastic. And as far as call centers go, are there specific places that you would recommend that somebody would go to find one? Like, so say you're super new to pay-per-calls, or are there decent ways that you'd recommend that somebody could choose one?
I don't. Most of the brands that we work with already had a call center set up on theirs because they're bigger brands. Not saying that that's the only way to go, and obviously they had to start somewhere. There are a lot of U.S. Call centers. There's Brazilian call centers, Colombian call centers, Philippines, Mexico. So they're all over the place. But I do not have any recommendations on how to find them or who to go to right now.
No, yeah, that makes sense, and totally cool. And I think that the fact that working with a brand that is a big brand that has an established call center is going to definitely help if you're a publisher for your conversions too. So that's something definitely to look for on the publisher side. And in terms of Madrivo, is there anything that you guys have coming out like on the pay-per-call space that you want to maybe mention that would maybe help either a pay-per-call advertiser or a pay-per-call publisher?
Where we're constantly updating our platform, so we're always trying to push the envelope a little bit more and do more and go above and beyond what other people are doing. So it's constantly changing. We're diversifying right now in the types of offers that we're running. So that's going to be something I know a lot of people are really concentrated on ACA and Medicare, which we are too. But we are branching out to a lot of other verticals in the finance space, different insurance space. So definitely reach out to one of us at Madrivo and we'll be able to give you different verticals that we're in that maybe others aren't in yet.
And that's awesome. And do you feel that these verticals in the pay-per-call space kind of change often, or are they kind of static as far as like, new things emerging?
I think new things are always emerging. We've all been in I was going to say pay-per-call space for years, but we've all been in the lead gen space for years. So we know that everything is with season, right? So it goes up, it goes down. Same with the different verticals in the pay-per-call space. So we had open enrollment. Medicare was phenomenal. Everybody was making a killing off of it. Medicare is one that we run year round, though. It does do better during open enrollment, but it's one that is a consistent player year round. ACA is doing really well right now. And then finance, because of what's going on in the world, that seems to be taking off next. So that's the one that we're really focusing on next to make sure that we're ready. The calls are already coming in. We've done some beta testing and the calls are coming in. They're working out for both the publisher and the advertiser. So now it's just time to optimize and scale from there and bring on other ones as well.
For sure. And do you feel like, you mentioned as far as like what's going on with the world, do you feel like the major events like either the pandemic or like the stuff going on with interest rates right now, do you feel like major world events, if you're a publisher and you're looking for kind of a niche to get into that's kind of thriving, it's not a bad idea to look into sort of what's going on with the world as like a context?
Absolutely. So when the pandemic hit, we had subscription boxes that in the past were mediocre. They were okay. It wasn't one of our like big wells that we call on our end, but then in the middle of the pandemic, the subscription boxes just bloomed. They were in our top 5 offers all the time consistently. So it does matter, so what's going on in the world does matter what's going to happen to your campaign. We all saw it also in the mortgage industry. We were doing a lot of lending and purchases of homes, and then interest rates started hiking up. The leads started going down. Nobody had, budget started shrinking. So you have to be nimble enough to switch to a different vertical and not just rely on one. You have to be versatile and be diverse in what you're doing.
Yeah, that seems to have a huge impact on your bottom line as a publisher. Just if you're promoting something that there's interest in, that there is a buzz about, that's always huge. And I've heard a similar thing with media buying. There is a big kind of affiliate movement for the PPP loans, and it was sort of like that was a huge thing during the pandemic because it was like some businesses were trying to get it, some individuals could get it, and so yeah, kind of thinking about it, what is going on with the world, and capitalizing on it is a great opportunity for affiliates.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of the next steps, is in terms of what uh, we want to take away from this. So essentially, you'd recommend for a brand to get started. Obviously, they want to make sure they're priced right. You want to make sure that they have the tech tools in place, whether that's an integration, tracking, fraud prevention. They want to make sure that they are able to take time to evaluate and also evaluate from the human perspective and see how the calls are actually going and test them. Is there anything else that you'd recommend just before we go that you'd recommend a brand do when get started with pay per call?
I think you covered it all in the recap there. So I think we're
Oh,
good.
fantastic. That's great. Well, awesome. And then, in terms of what is next for you guys, is there anything else that is coming out from Madrivo, or is there a nice way that you'd recommend people reach out to you guys?
Yeah, so definitely go out to our website. We have a lot of information on there. If you go to madrivo.com and then /services, you're going to be able to see all the different traffic channels that we have currently. We have one pagers on there. So go to more information about Madrivo. You're going to see a lot of one pagers, two pagers. You'll see our deck. Reach out to me directly. I'm Ninfa at madrivo.com. So Ninfa at madrivo.com. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with the right side of the business and hopefully get something going.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ninfa, for your time, and thank you, audience, and good luck with your pay per call programs.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. See ya.